Hello and welcome back to the Wasteland, everybody. Welcome back to Fallout New Vegas, where today we're going to be taking a look at every single perk in Fallout New Vegas, and we're going to be ranking them from the worst perks all the way up to the best perks. Now, Fallout New Vegas has like 117 perks or something like that in it, so this one's going to be quite a bit longer than my Fallout 3 video, and once again, this is going to be split up into kind of their own separate tiers. So this is just to make things a little bit easier, because sometimes these perks can be decent within their own tiers or decent within their own builds, but they might not be the best overall, or they might just be a generally decent perk. So first up, we're going to start out with the F tier perks, of which we have 21 of them. So coming in at our absolute bottom spot, we have In Shining Armor. This is a level 2 perk that's available from the Dead Money DLC. This one requires 20 repair and 70 science to get. And what this one is supposed to do, because this is a bugged perk, I actually have a whole video just talking about all of the bugged perks in Fallout New Vegas, which is like 40 minutes long. There's a lot more than what I thought was going on in there. I'm not going to go through all the bugs here, but this one is really important, because this one is supposed to get you 5 more damage threshold against energy weapons when wearing metal armor, and then an additional 2 damage threshold against energy weapons whenever you're using eyewear or helmets. Even if this perk worked, it wouldn't really be that great, because there's actually no way to get this at level 2. You actually don't have enough skill points, no matter what build you go with, to get the 20 repair and 70 science in order just to use this. But on top of that, metal armor is not really the greatest armor in the game. It can be decent if you go with the Gecko back reinforced metal armor, but even then it's still not the best heavy armor. And on top of that, this perk doesn't work. It doesn't do anything. There's nothing that In Shining Armor does. Main reason why this is bugged is because it's coded incorrectly. It's supposed to be towards energy weapons. The main problem is that no weapon is coded as energy weapons. There's weapons that are coded as plasma weapons, laser weapons, flame weapons, but no energy weapons, so this perk doesn't actually do anything. It is quite literally a dead perk. The second perk in F tier is called Junk Rounds. This is another Dead Money perk and another level 2 perk. This one requires 6 luck and 45 repair, and what this one allows you to do is that you can craft ammunition using scrap metal and tin cans. This doesn't necessarily sound like such a bad perk, because being able to craft ammunition, especially early on, could be really good since you don't have the most amount of ammo and you don't have the most amount of caps to be buying ammo. However, this takes up a lot of resources, where this is 1 scrap metal, 5 tin cans, and these have to be regular tin cans. They can't be bent tin cans. If you have that, you can't actually make anything from this, and every time that you use junk rounds, you just make 1 bullet of whatever type that you're making. This is just not that good even in the early game. You could argue maybe you can make some 4570s and go and rush Ranger Sequoia or something, but even then, it still wouldn't be that great. It's just not really worth it, and that's why it's down here. Next, we move on to the level 28 perk that's from the Lonesome Road DLC, and this is called Roughing It. Roughing It requires 100 survival, so your survival has to be completely maxed out in order to get this, and this makes it so whenever you're sleeping outside, you get the well-rested benefit. That doesn't really help. Well-rested gives you 10% more XP gain for a short amount of time, and this just allows you to do that more often. You can already do that in owned beds, and it's pretty easy to get an owned bed, definitely before level 28. So this one doesn't really help you out, and the XP gain is just not worth it. This one is purely for a character build. If you're going with like a cowboy character, this kind of makes sense to have because it fits the theme. But for any other build, not really. It's just not that good. Our next perk is Tagged. This is level 16 perk that has no requirements, and this one allows you to tag a 4th skill, which gives you 15 more points to that skill. This has to be one of the tag skills that you didn't pick at the start of the game. This one makes an appearance here again. It's just as bad here. It's arguably worse in Fallout New Vegas than it is in Fallout 3, because at least in Fallout 3 you got a perk every single level. In New Vegas you get a perk every other level, so you get half as many perks for this, or well, you'll equate to almost the same amount of perks between the two games, but you just get less perks overall, and going with something that just gives you more skill points is not worth it, especially considering you could have just tagged whatever it was you wanted in the first 3 tags. There's no reason to be picking Tagged, really, on any build. And our next perk is the level 10 perk that also doesn't have any requirements. This is Here and Now. This was also on our Fallout 3 tier list, and it was also pretty low. Here and Now lets you gain a level instantly. That's it. And funny enough, this one can actually be kind of bugged, because if you get the skilled trait at the very start of the game, that makes it so you receive 10% less XP gain. If you take this, it literally doesn't even get you up a level. It gets you 90% the way to a level, and then just stops. It's kind of funny how that's calculated, but instantly leveling up one time is just not worth it. You're not going to get anything from this. Even if you wanted to get to max level faster, there is way more than enough ways to get to max level in Fallout New Vegas. They throw plenty of enemies at you, they throw plenty of quests at you, there's a lot of stuff that you can do. So Here and Now is just a really bad perk that you should really never take unless you have picked all the perks that you already want and you're just trying to get to the level 50 perks, I guess. Up next we have the level 22 perk, Irradiated Beauty. This is also from the Lonesome Road, and you need 8 endurance in order to get this one. This one allows sleeping to remove all of your rads. Unless you're playing on the hardcore mode, then it only removes 100 rads at a time. That's just not worth it. There's easier ways to get rid of your rads. You can go to doctors, you can get rad away. Radiation is not such a big deal in Fallout New Vegas. There's actually not a whole lot of places that have it. Certain DLCs don't have any of it or next to none of it. Like Honest Hearts and Dead Money basically have no radiation. There's a couple more radiated places in like Old World Blues and a little bit in the Lonesome Road, but you just don't need to worry about it that much. Really easy to go to a doctor, and it's really easy to get enough rad away to just keep any of the radiation away from you. And then our next perk is In Broad Daylight, and you could argue this perk belongs lower too, but all of these perks at the bottom are pretty bad. So this is a level 36 perk, also from Lonesome Road, and this makes it so that you have no sneak penalty whenever you have the Pip-Boy light on. To this day, I still get people commenting on my 100 tips video for Fallout New Vegas. They didn't even realize the Pip-Boy had a light. And to be fair, I didn't realize it had a light either. Even after playing Fallout 3 multiple times, it took me a very long time to find out that it has a light. So a lot of people might not even realize that this thing has a light. Maybe this perk kind of helped them figure it out. But sneaking around with a light on just doesn't really make sense. Why would you do that? It just doesn't really help that type of build anyway. And if you're maxed out on sneak, it probably doesn't matter if you have your light on anyway, because sometimes the characters in Fallout New Vegas just can't see you. So I don't really see the point of this perk. I mean, it doesn't have any requirements, but it's still really bad. Our next perk is Swift Learner. This is a level 2 perk that requires 4 intelligence, and you can take this 3 times. You probably shouldn't take it even once, but what this one allows you to do is get an extra 10% XP gain whenever you get XP. So you can kind of level up a little bit faster. This isn't really going to help you at any point in the game. It's not really going to help you get to max level any faster than you otherwise would. There's actually a couple other perks if you wanted to do that that are a little bit better than this. Again, I don't think that any of the XP gain perks are really that useful in Fallout New Vegas, because if you plan on playing through the DLCs, if you plan on doing a decent amount of the quests, and if you plan on exploring a decent amount, you're going to hit max level. It's not super difficult. Some people have brought up that this is good if you take it with the skill trait. I would disagree with that. I don't think it's that good even with that one, since that one gives you a negative 10%. Funny enough, you can actually stack the skill trait up to 3 times. I've talked about that before, so plus 15 to all of your stats for a minus 10% XP gain. Yeah, I'm going to hit 100 in every stat well before I hit level 50. I don't need to be that high level, and a lot of the good perks, not even the level 50 perks, are set far below that, so even with that argument, it's not really that big of a deal. Then we got another repeat from Fallout 3, where our next 2 perks are kind of the same. Again, I'm going to put Infiltrator a little bit lower than Computer Whiz. These are both level 18 perks. Let's talk about Infiltrator first. This one requires 7 perception and 70 lock picking, and this allows you to have 1 more attempt picking a lock if you've already broken that lock. The only way you can break these is if you auto try to break them, if you try to force the lock. You just don't need to do that. If you don't do that, then you don't need this perk. And then Computer Whiz is very similar. This is also a level 18 perk that requires 7 intelligence and 70 science, and this one allows you to have 1 more hack attempt on locked out computers. You don't need to do this either. Pick your 3 attempts, go through the duds. If you don't know about that, I have a video just talking about how to do the computer game on New Vegas and just Fallout 3 and 4 as well. Then if you don't get to those things, or if you just want to do this a little bit simpler, just pick 3 answers. If it's not them, exit out of the computer, go back into the computer, pick 3 more answers until you get it right. That's all you have to do to hack computers in this game. Next up is our level 6 perk, Lead Belly. This is also making an appearance here. Lead Belly is back, and this one requires either 5 endurance or 40 survival, which is kind of interesting that it takes one or the other. There's not a whole lot of perks that are one or the other here. So this one's pretty cool in that regard. However, it's still not that great of a perk, because this one makes it so you take 50% reduced radiation whenever you're eating food or drinking from a water source. This one is slightly better than what it was in 3, because this includes food as well. Although, again, most foods don't really have a whole lot of radiation in them, so you're not going to be collecting a whole bunch of rads that way, unless you're going out of your way to eat irradiated food, which, if you're combining this with maybe an atomic build, it could be okay, but that's kind of the only build I see really working with this. And drinking from water, there isn't a whole lot of irradiated water in Fallout New Vegas to begin with. On top of that, there's actually even an upgrade that you can get in Old World Blues that makes it so drinking water doesn't give you any radiation, and you just have to pay for that one, so it kind of defeats the purpose of having lead belly. Our next perk is Mile in Their Shoes. This is a level 20 perk that requires 25 survival to use. And what this one does is whenever you consume Night Stalker squeezings, then you get a perception bonus of +1 perception. You also get 5 poison resistance, and you get +5 sneak, in addition to the normal benefits that this gives you for a short amount of time. This one is pretty bad because it has a requirement to actually make it work. Night Stalker squeezings are not very common in the Wasteland. You can make them yourselves, and there are ways to get multiple of them. But for going out of your way to get a specific unique item so that you can eat it, so that you get a small temporary buff, is just not worth it. 5 poison resist is kind of useful against like Kazdors, and that's about it. +1 perception does basically nothing. It gives you slightly better chances at picking a lock. And +5 sneak is kind of cool if you're going with a sneak build, but if you're going with a sneak build, you're probably going to max out sneak before you would ever need this anyway. So it's just a perk that doesn't need to exist, and it's weirdly specific on what it does. Our next terrible perk is the level 28 perk, Rad Absorption. This one requires 7 endurance, and this one makes it so you lose 1 rad every 20 seconds. This is 20 real-life seconds. This is not 20 in-game seconds. So you're losing rads at a very slow rate, and again, radiation does not really matter that much in Fallout New Vegas. It's even worse with some of the perks like Rad Child, which is an amazing perk, and Rad Absorption would actually take away from that, at least to some extent. Rad Absorption is just far too little for the benefit that it gives you. You can get rid of your rads other ways. You can talk to doctors. You can get rad away. None of this is going to be that expensive, and you're probably going to have a lot of it by the end of the game, especially by the time you're getting to like level 28. You should have a decent amount of medical supplies saved up at that point, or at least a decent amount of caps so you can go over and talk to doctors to get this fixed. Then our next perk is kind of a meme perk, I guess, or at least I would consider it kind of a meme perk. This is Ghastly Scavenger. So this one requires you to have the Cannibal perk, which will be showing up a little bit later because I think that one's a little bit more useful than this one, and it's kind of weird that this one has that requirement to it. But this one makes it so when you're in sneak mode, you have the option of eating either super mutants or feral ghouls' corpses in order to regain some HP, but you lose some karma. Karma does not matter at all in Fallout New Vegas unless you're just going for whichever level 50 perk you want. And it's going to be fairly easy to get to that because it's like, well, if I want the good perk, I'm just going to go kill a bunch of fiends. If I want the bad perk, I'm just going to go steal a bunch of stuff. And if I want neutral karma, I'm just going to steal a bunch of stuff and kill some fiends. And that kind of solves that. And I put this one down here because super mutants and ghouls are less common than humans in order for you to eat. That was my logic of putting this one down a little bit. If you want to take this one and go with a themed character, then absolutely do that because it could be really funny, especially with how many food-related perks you can actually take in New Vegas, where you could have this one, Lead Belly, Old World Gourmet, Cannibal. You could also have the Tribal whatever that's going to be showing up here in a little bit. Be taking any of those and make it all into just an eating character, and that could be kind of fun. So it does kind of serve a role there, but it's still not a great perk overall. Next perk is the level 12 perk from Lonesome Road, which is called Alertness. This one, you have to have perception that is 6 or above, but below 9, which is kind of a weird amount that you need. And what this one does is it gives you +2 perception when you're crouching or sitting still. Perception doesn't do a whole lot. It would allow you to lockpick a little bit better, and that's about it. Perception actually doesn't help VATS at all. That's a common myth for New Vegas. It does work in other games, though. It does work in Fallout 4 like that. It's just not New Vegas. It will only help you in terms of combat in being able to see markers on your compass a little bit easier. So if you can see red dots on your compass, you can see them a little bit further thanks to this perk. It's just not good. It's just not a good perk overall. It's a very simple perk, but it's not a good perk. Our next perk is Home on the Range. This is the level 8 perk that requires 70 survival, and this makes it so whenever you interact with a campfire, you have the option of sleeping, and this gives you all the benefits that sleeping comes with. So that's basically just removing your sleep in hardcore mode and potentially giving you the well-rested status effect, which gives you 10% more XP gain. So that's kind of cool. This doesn't really help though. Again, you can own a house. I put this one a bit higher than our last one of Roughing It because this one does have lower requirements, and campfires are pretty common throughout the Wasteland. They aren't super hard to find, as well as this is just a lower leveled perk. So it could be a little bit more useful, and it is good on like a cowboy themed build just to fill out that build a little bit more so you have more, cowboy in your cowboy build. but for actual practicality, it's not really that great. Our next perk is a level 40 perk, and the only level 40 perk in the game. This is Certified Tech. This is also from the Lonesome Road. Doesn't have any requirements to it, and what this one is supposed to do, this one is another one of those bugged perks. It's supposed to give you 25% more crit hit chance against robots, and an 85% increased chance of finding extra crafting things from destroyed robots. The crafting part is actually 100% true. You do get extra things from this, but the crit hit chance from this is much less than what it gives on. It's not 25%. It's actually far less than this because of the way that it was added in the game, so it's just not as good here. On top of that, robots are just not very common in New Vegas. They're pretty much only in Old World Blues, and that's it. Besides, I guess, the Securitrons and maybe the robots at Helios 1, there are a few robots at the start of, like, the Lonesome Road 2, and that's pretty much all the robots throughout the entire game. Our next perk is the level 2 perk, Fiend of Night, and this one requires 6 Perception and 30 Sneak. What this one allows you to do is that your eyes adapt better to low light conditions. This gives you the same status effect as, like, Night Vision or Cat Eye, which is kind of useful, but you can just have Cat Eye, and you have a chem fort that does this. You also have a flashlight on you all the time, which we talked about earlier, which also kind of helps with this. Yes, this does help if you just still want to be sneaky, so you can see things a little bit better, but it doesn't really matter a whole lot. Also, if you're just playing on PC, there's no reason to take this because you could just up the brightness of your screen. You could do this on console too, but I mean, you could have third-party extensions that just up the game's brightness too, and it wouldn't be that big of a deal. Our next perk is the level 10 perk, Night Person. Night Person doesn't have any requirements, and this one gives you +2 intelligence and +2 perception between the hours of 6 p.m. and 6 a.m. This is an okay bonus, but nothing way crazy. This can be kind of useful for lockpicking and computer hacking, and that's kind of about it. Our next perk is Infiltrator. This is another level 20 perk that is a carryover from Fallout 3, and this one just makes it so all locations on your map are already mapped out. This one's not actually terrible, but it's not needed either. If you've played the game a couple of times, you probably know where the major spots are. Yes, it's kind of useful for going around and trying to, like, find everything and explore, but you can already do that on your own. And then our very last perk that we have in the F tier is Walker Instinct. This one is another Lonesome Road perk. I always think that this was an Old World Blues perk, but this is a level 18 perk that requires 50 survival, and this one just makes it so whenever you're outside, then you gain +1 perception and +1 agility. These are just temporary buffs. Yes, a lot of the time you are going to be outside in New Vegas, so these are buffs that are going to be happening a decent amount, but +1 perception, like we talked about, doesn't really give you anything besides the chance to lockpick, which are usually indoors, so it's not going to help there. Agility is a bit more useful since it increases your reload speed, which is nice and gives you more action points, but there's still better perks that help with both of those aspects and could give you even more agility, so I just don't think it's that great of a perk overall. That's why it's here at the top, but it's better than, well, I guess, the other ones, sort of, in my opinion. Let's move on to the D tier perks now, of which we have 16. Up next is our level 4 perk, Cannibal. I kind of already teased this, but Cannibal's not really that great of a perk. It does get you some unique dialogue, which is pretty cool, and I guess it's good if you're going for a murder hobo run and you're okay with eating people. It also makes it so you can eat people whenever you find their bodies, and you do lose karma whenever you eat them. There is also another perk that's associated with this one though too, which is called the Meat of Kings, and this is for eating pretty much all of the heads of the major factions, where you have to eat the king, Caesar, the president, and I think Mr. House. It's a cool little Easter egg, and it actually does give you a decent amount of bonuses when you do eat somebody. I mean, Meat of Kings, top tier. It's an amazing perk in and of itself. Cannibal, much less. It's fun, but it's more for a themed build than an actual, like, good perk. Then up next, we have Mr. Sandman. This is a level 10 perk that requires 60 sneak. And what Mr. Sandman does is allows you to instantly kill somebody whenever they're sleeping. This is only NPCs that you can do this with. This is not animals or abominations or anything. The XP gain from this is just not really that useful. It is kind of okay for killing certain characters in their sleep, but it's going to be very theme-based as well. Mr. Sandman doesn't really come up a whole lot. There's not really a reason to take it either, so it's just kind of down here. It's not really that good. Up next is our level 2 perk, Retention, and this one makes it so all skill magazines that you read last for 3 real-time minutes. And this is pretty good. 3 minutes or 360 seconds does give you a lot of time for doing whatever you're trying to do, but it's not always that necessary. A lot of the time, if you're reading skill magazines, especially if you play like me, you're pretty much just going to be reading like the science magazine or the lockpicking magazine. Maybe to finish up quests, you'll be reading one of the other magazines, but that's about it, and it's really just like one skill check. Once you get through that, you don't need the magazine anymore. I'm usually not trying to hack into multiple terminals back to back to back, or trying to break into locks, back to back to back. So this one I don't find to be that useful, but there is one exception to this perk that does make it quite a bit better, and if you like this playstyle, I could definitely see you arguing this higher, and that is that there is a crit magazine that gives you like 3% more crit chance. And 3% more crit chance for 3 minutes is a pretty big deal, especially for certain builds. If you're going with like an energy laser weapon build, you're going with laser commander, you got a Gatling laser, it's going to be really strong. Our next perk is the level 22 perk from Lonesome Road as well. This is called Voracious Reader. There's a lot of really bad perks from Lonesome Road, honestly. This one requires 7 intelligence, and this one makes it so you can turn damaged books into blank magazines, and then you can copy an existing magazine already into them. So you can just get more magazines from this. You probably don't need this by the time you're hitting level 22. It might be a little bit useful, but it's not really a perk that I would go out of my way to get. Our next perk is the level 26 perk, Nerves of Steel. This one requires 7 agility, and this one makes it so that you refresh your action points 20% faster than you otherwise would. This is just not enough, even for an action point build. It doesn't really up your action points all that much, since all you're going to be using that for is VATS, since you can't use it for running unless you have mods, in which case then it might be a little bit more useful. But in the regular game, getting your action points up slightly faster is really just not going to help. The main problem with this is just the amount of time that it takes. This is like rad absorption, but it's for your action points. So it's arguably better, because there isn't really a whole lot of ways to get that back. There's not a whole lot of ways to get more of it, but it's still not that great overall. It's still just kind of a slow acting perk overall. Our next perk is the level 12 perk, Long Haul, and this one requires 6 endurance and 70 barter. And what this one does is it allows you to fast travel when you're over encumbered. This doesn't really help a whole lot. It's kind of a nice quality of life perk to have if you just like hoarding everything. And if you're going for like a hoarding only run or something like that, go for it. But for everything else, it's not really that necessary. The main thing that comes up whenever I talk about this perk is the gold bars at the Sierra Madre, which, yeah, you can take all of them and you can get them all out of the Sierra Madre if you would like to, but you still don't need to fast travel with them. You could potentially just drop them and then fast travel back to your house. Or even better, if you completed Old World Blues, you have the transmitter, and you can just press that and you'll be teleported right to your house. Then you can drop it off all there. I mean, the sink is already one of the best places to trade at, so money shouldn't be that big of a deal. If not, then you can just take out the bars that you can carry and run them back. This is a quality of life perk and really nothing else. Up next, we have the level 8 perk, Quick Draw. This one requires 5 agility, and this one makes it so that you can draw and holster your weapons 50% faster. This goes with a cowboy theme. It's kind of cool, but it's not necessary. The NPCs don't draw their weapons fast. There's no like quick draw events in this game or anything like that. A lot of the time, if you want to kill somebody, you can just already have your weapon out, and then they still have to draw their weapon. And a lot of the time, even if you had to draw your own weapon, you'd still probably draw it out faster than the NPCs would, unless they already have their weapons out. So again, it's more of a themed build. It's not bad, but it's not good either. Up next is the level 26 perk from Lonesome Road called Lessons Learned. This requires 6 intelligence, and this one makes it so you get 1% XP gained per player level. So anytime that you would gain XP, you get more XP from that. So this could be all the way up to 49% more XP. And that might seem like a lot, but you're just going from level 49 to level 50. So by the time you're getting this, it's going to be level 27 plus. So 27% more XP gained each time that you get this. Yeah, you are going to be leveling up faster, but at the same point, there's a lot better perks around these levels where you don't want to be wasting them on perks like this that are only going to get you to that max level a little bit quicker. It's just not a perk that's really worth it, in my opinion. I don't really like any of the XP perks. I don't think that they're necessary. I don't think that any of them really help you all that much. They would in a game like Fallout 4, which is why I would argue Idiot Savant is arguably one of the best, if not the best perk in Fallout 4, because it just lets you level up faster. But in that game, there's not really a cap to your level. In this game, there is. You can only go up to level 50. Our next perk is the level 8 perk, Terrifying Presence. This one requires 70 speech, and this one makes it so you can potentially intimidate your foes with dialogue, and they'll flee for 5 seconds. This is fun. This is a really fun perk to have, but it's not necessarily a great perk either. It's just kind of more of a fun perk, especially if you're going to go with like a pacifist build, and this one is actually really fun to run. So that's why it's down here. I don't think there's really much else to talk about with this one. Up next, we have Tribal Wisdom. This is the level 8 perk that requires 70 survival. This is also from Honest Hearts, and this one makes it so that you get 50% less limb damage from animals, mutated animals, and mutated insects, which is kind of nice. Rad scorpions and Kazdors can beat you up. Yaoguais can beat you up. The green geckos can beat you up. So taking less limb damage from them is kind of nice. As well as you get plus 25 poison resistance and the ability to eat insects when you're in the sneak mode. I mean, it can go along with the eating build. The poison resist is kind of cool, particularly towards Cazadors, and that's about it. They're really the only ones that you have to worry about the poison from. So if you just really, really hate Cazadors, I could see you taking this and taking like Entomologist. I think that one's better than this. There's also the problem with this, and that's you can get the Heartless perk for free if you're on Old World Blues at any point, because you start out with it as soon as you get there, and then you can swap off whether having your heart or not having your heart. And if you don't have your heart, then you can't be poisoned at all. So the poison resist doesn't really matter in that aspect. And we move on to the other Honest Heart perk. That's also a level 8 perk. This one doesn't have any requirements. This is Sneering Imperialist. And this one gives you plus 25% more damage and plus 25% more accuracy in VATS towards tribals and towards raiders. This is kind of funny, and it's pretty okay in Zion, honestly, because you're going to just be fighting tribals. Out in the Wasteland, you're just going to be fighting raiders, and raiders aren't that tough, but you do get some really good dialogue from this one, so I think that's the main selling point to have for this. I still don't think it's that great, but it's kind of a fun one to have. Our next perk is the level 22 perk, Spray and Pray. This one doesn't have any requirements, and this one makes it so that you do 75% less friendly fire towards companions. Just don't shoot your companions in the back. It's pretty simple. Just don't do that, and you won't be needing this perk. A lot of the time I don't carry around a companion anyway, but if I am doing companion quests, then I've never really thought like, oh, if I only had that perk, I wouldn't have blown him up with my Fat Man or something. That's about it. This could be a little bit useful if you were doing like a hardcore survival mode where you were doing like a 1 death run or a no death run. Yeah, maybe, but then you're still taking companions and they're potentially a liability towards you anyway in those type of modes, so it's still not really that great of a perk. Next is our level 6 perk, which is Fortune Finder. This one requires 5 luck, and this one makes it so you find considerably more bottle caps in stockpiles. More money is always good, and this is a nice quality of life thing, and if this is your first playthrough of New Vegas, perfectly fine to take. If you've played New Vegas a couple times like I have, you know there's a lot of ways to break the economy in New Vegas, and this is not one of the more efficient ways. There is much, much better ways than just finding extra little bits of money in stockpiles. So that's why it's down here. It's not a bad perk, but it's not really a necessary perk for any build either. Our next perk is the level 8 perk, Scrounger. This one requires 5 luck, and this one makes it so you get considerably more ammunition in stockpiles. This one's kind of nice. It's useful, at least for the first playthrough, but there's plenty of ways to get a lot of bullets in New Vegas, and since you can make your own ammo, this one's just not as useful as it could be. It's still not a bad perk to take, but not really one that you need. And then we have the level 2 perk, which is Hunter. This one requires 30 survival in order to get, and this one makes it so when in combat, you do 75% more crit damage towards animals and mutated animals. Now, 75% more crit damage is a ton of extra damage, and you're already doing extra damage because you're hitting crits, so that's really nice. The problem is that there's just not a whole lot of animals that this one is really good against. Pretty much all the endgame enemies don't count as animals. Deathclaws are abominations, Night Stalkers are abominations, kind of, sometimes, usually, at least in terms of this perk. Cazadors also aren't here, giant rad scorpions, things like that. They're not considered animals. Certain big enemies are, though, like the Yaoguais in Zion, so this is really good if you want to rush Zion early on, because you can clear through them pretty quick. And then other than that, you have like Lake Larks, which are in a couple of areas. So there's just not a whole lot of different animals that you can really benefit from this, because you don't need extra damage to kill Brahmins or Bighorners or anything like that. So that's why it's just kind of down here. And then our very last perk here in the D tier is Educated. This is the level 4 perk that requires 4 intelligence. And what this one does is that it gets you plus 2 more skill points every time that you level up. Now, just like Educated in Fallout 3, this one is much better if you take it early on, because the later you take it on, the less benefits you get from it. So if you are going to take this, take it early on, and it's really only good with a low intelligence build. You don't really need to have this many more points, and there's better ways to get points than this. Like Comprehension is a much better way of getting points than Educated, as well as Comprehension has its own bonuses, which is really nice. But Educated just doesn't really give you enough, and it's not very difficult to actually get 100 in every single stat if you plan on maxing out your character. So it's just not needed. This is without Educated, so long as you have a decent amount of intelligence. Even more so if you go and get like the implant early on and you know about like skilled, and especially if you know about the skilled glitch, then it's really easy to get to 100 and everything. Yeah, but Educated just fits in this weird spot where it's only kind of good for people that have picked like 4 or 5 intelligence that can still get this perk and kind of get benefit from it and get it at the start. So that's why it's the top of D tier, because it still has a purpose. It's just not a great purpose overall. All right, that'll do it with the D tier perks. Let's move on to the C tier perks, where these perks are quite a bit better. And some of these perks are actually really good on specific builds. So let's talk about each of them. Coming in at our lowest spot in C tier, we have Hobbler. This is the level 12 perk from Dead Money. This requires 7 perception, which is not really that great. Perception isn't a great skill to have high to begin with, but this makes it so you get an increased chance of hitting opponents in the legs in VATS by 25%. Personally, I don't really use VATS in these games. Sometimes I do on certain builds, but most of the time I'm just firing normally at enemies. So this is going to be better for somebody that uses VATS pretty often. Hobbler, though, I don't find to be super useful. I don't find it to be super bad, though, either, because hitting things in the legs makes it so I can cripple them easier. And if I can cripple their legs, that means they're probably not going to be able to rush me as quickly as they otherwise would. I can then at least outrun something like Death Claws, or potentially catch up to enemies so that they can't run as far away from me as they would like. So it's not a particularly bad perk, I just don't think it's always necessary. Our next perk is the level 16 perk, Weapons Handling. The only requirement to this one is that you have to have less than 10 strength. And Weapons Handling makes it so that you get -2 from all of the weapons strength requirements in order to wield them. So every weapon in New Vegas does actually have a strength requirement to wield them, and this is to make sure that they're more accurate. If you don't meet or exceed the strength requirement, you're not going to be as accurate because it's going to have more wobble, and that's just going to make it harder to aim, and you're just going to not hit stuff as often as you otherwise would. This isn't necessary for any build, but it is nice if you're going with particularly heavy weapons, like if you're going specifically for the 50 cal and you want it on a particular character that doesn't have high enough strength to kind of match this, but that's also kind of hard because you can get like the reinforced spine from Old World Blues that gives you +2 strength, and that's a temporary +2 strength that just is always on your character. That's kind of a better thing, and that's free. So it can be good on low strength characters if you're specifically going for a certain weapon. On high strength characters, you don't need to worry about this at all. And on low strength characters that you already know what weapons you're going to be picking out, then this one is also not necessary. That's why it's here in C tier. It's kind of a weird one to rank because it really depends on the build that you're going for. Most builds do not need this perk, though. Our next perk is the level 6 perk, Ferocious Loyalty. This one requires 6 charisma in order to get, and this one makes it so whenever you drop below 50% HP, then your companions get 50 more damage resist. This is actually not bad. It helps out with your companions, but if you're already getting beat up and you might be running away from fights, then having your companions stick around may or may not sway the fight for you. I guess it just really depends on how you like playing this. Generally, I don't like really being at low HP in this game. Although if you're playing on the very hard difficulty, you can hit to 50% HP with like one shot. If you get hit with a 50 cal, you're pretty much going there. So it's not unreasonable for this perk to actually trigger. It's just that it's not always the most necessary thing for your companions, so that's why I'd put it here. Our next perk is the level 14 perk, Center of Mass. This one requires 70 guns, and this one makes it so whenever you're in VATS, you do an additional 15% more damage when targeting enemies' chest. This one's actually pretty decent on a VATS build. It's just that most of the time you're going to be wanting to target the weak spot, which is usually the head. So the chest isn't always the best place to aim, but if you get this early on enough and you are going with a dedicated VATS build, it can still rack up quite a bit of damage, especially for weapons that do have very low action point costs, so it can be pretty good in those builds. Up next is our level 10 perk, that is also a charisma perk. This is Animal Friend. This one requires 6 charisma as well, and this one also requires 45 survival. This one you can actually get 2 ranks of, and this makes it so the very first rank makes it so hostile animals are no longer hostile towards you, they become neutral, and the second rank makes it so that those animals will come to your aid, or potentially come to your aid to fight. Which is kind of cool. Again, animals are not necessarily the strongest thing in the game, but it can help. And this is also why I brought up earlier the Night Stalkers are not always abominations, because for this perk, they count as animals. So this perk can actually be pretty good in Old World Blues, because you can just take it and run right through a whole bunch of sections where there are Night Stalkers there. You don't have to worry about them at all. And it's kind of cool if the Night Stalkers are helping you fight. It's really weird that they count as abominations for everything else, but they do count as animals for this. Next up is the level 12 perk, Heavyweight. This is another Dead Money perk, and this one requires 7 strength. This one makes it so every weapon that you're carrying around that weighs 10 or more is cut in half. This doesn't affect weapons that are naturally above 10 weight, and then you have something modifying their weight. This only affects a few weapons. It's pretty much like the Gatling laser, because that one weighs 18, and if you put the lightweight frame on it, then it goes down to 9. But if you add heavyweight, it also goes down to 9. So it's just 9 effectively, because one is going to cancel out the other and vice versa as well. For pretty much everything else, it's going to cut your weapons in half that are heavy. This can be really good for like the 50 cal, because that weighs 20 normally, and it can be cut in half down to 10, or you can get the carbon fiber parts on it that only knocks it down by 7, so it goes to 13, and then you can cut it down even further into 6.5 weight. So it sometimes does stack in your favor this way. It's just that you don't necessarily need to be carrying around a bunch of heavy weapons. If you do like carrying around heavy weapons, then by all means go for this, and it can be really good for looting super mutants, especially like Black Mountain if you like doing that strategy of getting caps, because later on they'll have like light machine guns, they will have like super sledges, and those always weigh more than 10, so you can carry around twice as many of them, which is really cool. Our next perk is a level 2 perk, Old World Gourmet. This one requires 6 endurance and 45 survival. And what this one does is it gives you plus 25 resistance towards addiction rate. This one can actually be pretty good because you could stack it with chem resist as well, and that's really nice. The other bonus you get from this is 50% more health whenever you're eating snack foods, drinking scotch, drinking vodka, or drinking wine, in addition to their normal effects. The extra healing buff is kind of cool, but it's not really a whole lot. It is a level 2 perk, so you can get this one right away, and that's kind of what it's just going for. It's a decent perk to grab early on, especially if you want your addiction rate down, assuming you're not going with like a Logan's Loophole run or something like that, in which case then this perk wouldn't really give you that much. But for other builds, it's actually not too bad, so that's why it's here. Our next perk is the level 8 perk, Rad Resistance. This one requires 5 endurance and 40 survival in order for you to get, and this one just gives you plus 25 radiation resistance. This one's good because it's just a flat bonus to any character, and potentially not getting rads is good. Even on like a rad child build, this is still pretty good since you can more easily control your rads. So you always want them to be high, but you don't want them to be too high that it actually kills you. So even in a build like that, this one is still pretty decent. There's just not a whole lot of radiation in Fallout New Vegas though, so this one's just not really necessary, and you can subvert radiation a bunch of other ways. Our next perk is Robotics Expert. This is a level 12 perk that requires 50 science, and this lets you do 25% more damage towards robots. This perk does work for its full amount of damage, and you can also shut down robots. This one is really good if you want to be taking it to Old World Blues, because you can just kill the robots a little bit easier. That's really the only place where robots are kind of an issue, and if you've already went through Old World Blues, this one does lose a lot of its usefulness just because there's not very many robots after that. It's a decent perk before that, but it's a lower than average perk if you do it after that. Our next perk is the level 12 perk Life Giver. This one also requires 6 endurance, and this one gives you plus 30 to your maximum HP. That's it. More HP is good on any character. It's just not amazing on any character, so awesome. It's going to be right in the middle of C tier here. Then we have Intense Training, another level 2 perk. This one doesn't have any requirements, and you can take this one up to 10 times. This one just allows you to have plus 1 to any special stat. This one is arguably better than it was in Fallout 3 because there isn't a perk like Almost Perfect by the end of that game, or the end of this game. So getting your stats up a little bit more is going to help. It's going to make it so you can potentially get other perks, and any of those special stats that you are raising are going to raise up your other skills too. So it's nice. It's a pretty good perk, especially for level 2, and it's a very good default perk to take when you just don't know if you want to take anything else. Our next perk is the level 12 perk Unstoppable Force. This one requires 7 strength and 90 melee weapons. A pretty high requirement on this one. And this one allows you to do 4 times extra damage when enemies are blocking with melee or unarmed attacks. This one's really good on a melee or an unarmed build. I don't think it's one of their best ones, but it is still pretty decent because at least whenever you're fighting another melee enemy or another unarmed enemy, they might try to block you, and doing 4 times more damage when they are blocking is really good. That's a huge buff in damage. The main problem is a lot of enemies might not even have melee weapons to fight you, even if you're doing a melee or an unarmed build. There's not a whole lot that are, and sometimes they don't even block. So this one varies in how good it is. It's really good if you just end up fighting a bunch of Nightkins or super mutants, because they will tend to block quite a bit. Sometimes raiders, Legion members too, they tend to have melee. But other factions, not so much, and just rushing right up next to them with melee or unarmed and beating them down before they get a chance to draw their melee weapon to fight you is generally fairly easy to do, even on the higher difficulties here. Next perk is the level 4 perk Running Gun. This one requires either 45 guns or 45 energy weapons, and this one makes it so it halves your total spread with one-handed weapons whenever you're walking or running. This is okay. It can be pretty decent for like submachine guns. That's going to be the main bonus that this thing gets. Pistols are kind of cool too if you can spam fire them at enemies. It's kind of a cool perk to have, but it's not really necessary in any build. You could just stop and fire normally. And assuming you are moving a lot, that's probably because an enemy is very close to you. So you're just trying to shoot them as fast as possible, and it's probably going to be pretty easy to hit that target. Next up is Tunnel Runner. This is level 26 perk that requires 8 agility, and this one makes it so you get 25% faster sneaking speed when wearing light armor or no armor. This one's actually not too bad because you can stack it with a couple of things to actually move fairly fast when you're sneaking, It's, I think, as fast as you normally would run, too. Or maybe it's a little bit faster than that if you want to stack all of these on there. That's kind of cool. It's not real necessary, but if you're going for that sort of build and you want to go for like a super sneaky speed walking mode, speed crouching mode, this one's kind of cool. So that's why it's up here. Up next, we kind of have a tie between our two VATS friends here. Mysterious Stranger at level 10 and Misfortune at level 10. I put Mysterious Stranger a little bit lower because I think Misfortune kills things a little bit faster than him usually, although sometimes she causes more crashes too, so yeah, it's your call as to which one you want. You could also take both of these too. Both these require you to be level 10 and have 6 luck. Mysterious Stranger makes it so there's a 10% chance whenever you target somebody in VATS that the Mysterious Stranger might show up to finish him off. This is kind of cool. It's the same way it worked in Fallout 3. He shows up and just magnums him to death. Misfortune, also a 10% chance of her showing up in VATS, where she's got her sawed-off shotgun that has explosive rounds in it, making her potentially more dangerous for surrounding people. But, I mean, she does get the job done a little bit better than Mysterious Stranger. Next, we have the level 6 perk, the Professional. This one requires 70 sneak, and this makes it so your sneak crit hits with revolvers, pistols, and submachine guns all inflict 20% more damage. This is kind of cool. It's also a bit bugged in a way, so it makes it a little bit better than this. And if you're going with a pistol-only build, or one-handed only build, then this one is actually quite good. Up next is level 6 perk, Bloody Mess. This doesn't have any requirements, and this just gives you 5% more damage to every weapon, as well as it makes it so you have more violent animations, or a chance to trigger more violent animations when you do kill somebody. The more violent animations is kind of cool, unless again you stream and record like I do, in which case then it sometimes causes issues for YouTube and sometimes causes videos to get demonetized. 5% more damage is 5% more damage though. It's always going to be a decent perk to take, regardless of how you enjoy playing. And then our very last perk in C tier is the level 4 perk, Travel Light. And this one requires 45 survival, and this makes it so long as you're wearing light armor or no armor, you move 10% faster. This is actually pretty nice. It's a nice quality of life perk to just be running around with. It's really good on a melee or an unarmed build where speed is really good to where you can just constantly hit an enemy, step back, have them whiff their swing, move forward and hit them again, and you can just keep doing this. It makes it so those fights are even easier than they already would be. It makes it so it's a whole lot more consistent, as well as you can just rush your enemy faster. So Travel Light is actually pretty good unless you're planning on not using light or no armor, which I would recommend that you at least go with light armor, because light armor is pretty good. Now we move on to the B tier perks in Fallout New Vegas, where we are actually getting into some pretty good ones and generally nice ones to have for most builds. We also have 27 of these, so quite a lot. Our very first one up is called Nuka Chemist. Nuka Chemist makes a return, and this is a level 22 perk. This one requires 90 science in New Vegas, which is quite high, and this one allows you to unlock other recipes for Nuka-Cola at workbenches. So this will allow you to change Nuka-Cola into Nuka-Cola Victory Quartz or the Ice Cold Nuka-Colas. These are kind of cool. They're nice little bonuses, and it's kind of just a fun perk to have. It's at the very bottom here in B tier. I was debating whether putting this into C tier, but some of these have a little bit of a bonus effect, and sometimes if you want to stack these with a chems build, they can be kind of nice. Our next perk is the level 12 perk, Silent Running. This one requires 6 agility and 50 sneak, and what this one does is it makes it so running when you're crouched does not affect if enemies can see you. So you can move at any speed that you would like when you're crouched. This one's kind of nice, especially if you want to go with a sneak sniper build or a sneak melee build. It can be pretty good. Other builds don't necessarily need this, and this one technically did get nerfed from Fallout 3, since it does the same thing in Fallout 3, but in Fallout 3 you also got plus 10 sneak, which is kind of a nice bonus, not really necessary, and this perk is still decent though. Our next perk is the level 10 perk from Zion. This is Fight the Power. This doesn't have any requirements, and this one gives you plus 2 damage threshold and 5% more crit chance whenever you're fighting NCR, Legion, or the Brotherhood members. This one's pretty nice because you are going to be fighting either Legion or NCR by the end of the game, and they do make up the 2 larger factions of the game, so this helps regardless of whose side you're picking. I mean, if you're picking House or Yes Men, then you're going to be fighting both of them anyway. It's not a huge boost in damage nor in defense, but it is a nice overall bonus for pretty much any build. Our next perk is a level 20 perk from Old World Blues, Atomic. This one you have to have 6 endurance to get, and this one makes it so whenever you're in an irradiated area, as it claims, although you can self-radiate with any sort of food, any food that has radiation, you can actually do this. And this one will give you 25% more movement speed and attack speed, as well as 2 more damage threshold, 2 more strength, and it will give you faster action point regeneration than what you normally have. And this one is kind of cool because you can trigger it yourself. And that's going to be the best way to use atomic, is just by eating foods that give you radiation so that you get this bonus, and so that you can potentially keep stacking this bonus. This one is a little bit awkward if you want to do builds like that, but in any area that does have radiation, you are generally better than you otherwise would be, and 25% more attack speed for any weapon is quite good. And next up is the level 30 perk, Burden to Bear. This is a Lonesome Road DLC perk, and this one requires 6 strength and 6 endurance, and this gives you 50 more carry weight. This one's just a nice quality of life thing to have in Fallout New Vegas. Being able to carry more gear is always good, so there's that. Our next perk is the level 8 perk Strongback, which is up here for the same reason. Main reason why I put Strongback higher than Burden to Bear, even though they do the exact same thing, they give you 50 more carry weight. Strongback has slightly less requirements at only 5 strength and 5 endurance, and you can get it at level 8. So that just automatically makes it better than Burden to Bear. Although you can stack both of these, which is really nice, and that's generally what I do because I like hoarding stuff. Our next perk is the level 2 perk, Rapid Reload. Rapid Reload requires 5 agility and 30 guns in order for you to get, and this makes it so you reload all of your weapons 25% faster than you normally would. This is pretty good, and it kind of helps out with just about any build, unless you're doing like a melee or an unarmed build, or you're going with like thrown explosives that don't really care about this. But for pretty much every other build, it's really nice. There is a bug with this one, though, and that is that if you load a save, there's a good chance that the perk screws up the gun that you currently have equipped, because it'll actually work in reverse, where it gives you minus 25% reload speed, but as soon as you swap the gun off, then it will go back to normal. It's kind of a weird bug that has just always existed in the game. Our next perk is a level 14 perk, Adamantium Skeleton. This one doesn't have any requirements to it, and this one just gives you the bonus of taking 50% less limb damage. This is really nice. Not breaking your limbs is great, especially if you're playing the hardcore mode where you need to either have a doctor or a doctor's bag to fix up your broken limbs. So just not breaking them in the first place is really good. And this is even better if you want to take the trait Light Frame, which makes it so that you're more likely to break your bones than you otherwise would. So this can help out with that. And same with if you get the extra bonus of Tough Guy. That can also help just with the limb damage, so this one's pretty nice to have. Next perk is Splash Damage. This is a level 12 perk that requires 70 explosives, and this one makes it so all of your explosive weapons have a 25% larger explosion radius than they otherwise would. That's really good, but it can also be potentially bad, because this makes it so that you're more likely to suffer from your own explosions, which is not the best thing in the world. But you are more likely to hit more enemies with it, and that can be pretty good. So this one's kind of hit or miss, but I always take it with an explosive build, and sometimes I regret it, and other times I don't. It just depends on what the area is that I'm fighting in and how close enemies are to me. Next up is our level 16 perk, Action Boy / Action Girl. This one requires 6 agility, and this one you can actually take twice. This one gives you 15 more action points than you otherwise would have. This is really good for a VATS build. It's really nice to have more action points. It's not really necessary for any build, but VATS builds are certainly going to be effective from this, and VATS builds are quite strong in New Vegas. Up next is the level 8 perk Stonewall. This one requires 6 strength and 6 endurance, and this one gives you plus 5 more damage threshold against melee and unarmed enemies, and you can no longer be knocked down during combat. The second part of this is really good. The first part of this is also pretty good, because certain melee and unarmed enemies can do a lot of damage to you, especially if there's something like Deathclaws, and New Vegas Deathclaws are probably the scariest version of Deathclaws. So that's nice, as well as just not being able to be knocked down is really good, because if you get knocked down, it's really easy to pile damage on top of you, so Stonewall can be really, really effective in an unarmed and a melee build. It can also be good in other builds, but those are the two that it's going to be the most useful for. I guess maybe explosives too if you end up knocking yourself down. Up next is the level 12 perk, Fast Metabolism. This one doesn't have any requirements, and this one just makes it so you get 20% more HP whenever you take stim packs. That's pretty good. Stim packs are really good for health. They're not as useful in New Vegas as they are in some of the other games, at least if you're playing on the hardcore difficulty, because everything is healing over time. This is still better healing over time, so it's still nice to have. But this makes it so you can stack other foods and stuff, and you can get more healing from them than you could potentially get from stim packs. Next is the level 14 perk Light Step. This one requires 6 perception and 6 agility, and this makes it so you won't set off any sort of floor traps. This one is particularly good in the Lonesome Road, where the satchel charges go off pretty much immediately and do really high damage. They're also just very hard to spot. And it's really good in Dead Money as well, because there is a ton of just bear traps, frag mines, tripwires that you can easily trip over in that DLC. It's also just very difficult to see in that DLC because of the cloud. So this one, if you really hate Dead Money, I would definitely recommend you get this one before you go there, because it's going to make that DLC immensely easier. Also, if you've never tried it before, go with an unarmed build there. You're gonna have a really easy time. Next is Solar Powered, the level 20 perk. This one requires 7 endurance, and this one gives you plus 2 strength and plus 1 HP whenever you're outside between the hours of 6 a.m. and 6 p.m. Having more HP regen is kind of nice, even though this isn't a massive amount, and getting the extra strength is also really nice for either carrying more stuff or potentially cheating out weapon requirements. So it's kind of useful there. It's a decent perk overall, and it makes you a little bit tankier, so that's nice. Up next is level 10 perk, Plasma Spaz. This one requires 70 energy weapons, and this makes it so the action point cost of all plasma weapons is reduced by 20%. This one is really, really good for a plasma build, especially if you want to rush the Q35, and then just build it all for like VATS and everything. You can have an incredibly strong build just right out the gate. That is really, really nice. The main problem with this is that it doesn't really affect very many weapons, which is why I decided to put it down here. It's basically that, the plasma rifle, plasma defender, plasma pistol, and like the plasma caster. Out of those ones, you're most likely going to be using either the plasma defender, plasma pistol, or the plasma rifle in a VATS role. The plasma caster just isn't really the best for that, as it takes up a lot of action points. And in a very specific build, this one could be rated a lot higher. It's just that weight against everything else, I just don't think it's as necessary. Then we have another VATS perk. This is the level 6 perk, Gunslinger. This one makes it so you're 25% more accurate in VATS with one-handed weapons. Really good if you want to go with a pistol build, because a lot of one-handed weapons, a lot of pistols, are pretty low on the action point costs. So like the unique 45 is, the unique 9mm is, and it just makes it so you're more likely to hit. That's pretty good for those builds. Our next perk is the level 4 perk, Comprehension. This one requires 4 intelligence, and this one makes it so every time that you read a skill magazine, you get an additional point from that. Usually you would get +3 for each skill magazine in Fallout New Vegas, but this would be +4, as well as this also doubles the amount of points that you get from reading skill magazines. So normally you get like +10 lockpicking, this would be +20 lockpicking, which is really good. This makes it so you can rush a lot of items pretty early on with Comprehension. And if you're going with a fairly low intelligence build, this one can be really nice. You can easily max out your character, hundreds in every stat. So that's pretty good. Comprehension is actually a pretty solid perk overall. It's not entirely necessary, because even without this, if you just have high intelligence, or if you just don't care about getting to 100 and everything, it's not needed, but it is nice. Up next is the level 10 perk, Nerd Rage. This one requires 5 intelligence and 50 science, and this makes it so when you drop to 20% or lower HP, then you get +15 to your damage threshold, and your strength becomes 10. 15 more damage threshold is a lot of armor, and that is pretty nice. It could potentially save you once you do drop that low, so that's really good. And you could also potentially cheat this out to carry around more stuff if you would like early on. So it's pretty nice for that. New Vegas is probably the Fallout that you want to have the highest amount of health in, because if you do drop below 20% HP, there's still a very good chance that most enemies in this game, at least if you're playing on the very hard difficulty, can still kill you very quickly in just a couple hits. So this one can be a nice perk, but don't rely on it to keep you alive. Next up is the level 10 perk, Mathrath. This one requires 70 science, and this one makes it so you reduce your action point cost from all weapons by 10%. This is pretty good, especially in a VATS build. You're always going to want to have this on a VATS build, so it's nice. Our next perk is Living Anatomy. This is a level 8 perk that requires 70 medicine, and this one makes it so it shows the damage threshold as well as the health of all targets whenever you go into VATS, or just when you shoot an enemy, you can see that underneath them. And this also gives you an additional 5% more damage to humans and to non-feral ghouls. This is kind of cool. The extra 5% damage is kind of whatever. Most enemies you're going to be fighting are humans, so it is still 5% more damage most of the time. But really being able to see the enemy's armor and being able to see their health really helps out. Because if you don't know what type of armor an enemy is wearing, or you don't know how much damage threshold they can have, this can give you a pretty big advantage, because you could just see something, like you see a rad scorpion, for example, then you can see how much armor it has. And if it's a giant rad scorpion, it has like 18 armor. So putting armor-piercing rounds into your gun would help you out in this case. Living Anatomy is pretty nice. I also ran this one quite a bit on some of the builds when I was doing weapon reviews for Fallout New Vegas, and I got a bunch of questions asking what mod I was using to see enemies' health bars and stuff. It's actually not a mod, it's just this perk. It's just not a whole lot of people take it, and I think it's actually a pretty decent perk, kind of an underrated perk. Up next is our one and only perk from the Gunner's Arsenal DLC. This is Mad Bomber. This one requires you to be level 6 and have 45 repair as well as 45 explosives. And what this one does is it allows you to have more crafting recipes, which is really strong, especially for an explosives build, because Explosives builds start out kind of weak. They're not really the best. You can rush certain items and make them much stronger, but if you're just going through the game normally, they do start out as one of the weaker builds. And this makes it so they're not that bad because you can actually make really good explosives early on, and you can also make some of the best explosives, so this one is really, really good for those builds. Our next perk is actually a tie because both these perks do the same thing. This is Lady Killer for Min, and I'm gonna butcher this name. Cherchez les femmes. I hope I'm saying that right. It's a very French word, and I do not speak French well at all. Whether you chose to be a guy or a girl, this is 10% more damage towards women, as well as some other unique dialogue options that you get with both of these. These ones are still good. 10% more damage is pretty nice. It's just that you're less likely to be fighting women than you are to be fighting men. So things like Black Widow and Confirmed Bachelor are going to be better because they're against guys. That's just how it goes in New Vegas and generally in the Fallout games, where more boss enemies are guys and more raider type enemies that you're going to be fighting more regularly are also guys. Then we have the level 4 perk Entomologist. This one requires 4 intelligence and 45 survival, and this one makes it so you do 50% more damage towards mutated insects. This is pretty good in Fallout New Vegas just for the Kazdors. Kazdors are kind of a bane of existence to everybody that plays these games. They can be pretty tough, they move really fast, they do really high damage, and they can sometimes be surprisingly tanky. This will also help in the early game against other enemies like rad scorpions. They're fairly common as well. Most of the other bugs aren't such a big deal. I guess the legendary bloatfly is, but usually it's Kazdors and rad scorpions that are the two major ones. Having extra damage towards some of the other ones like mantises are nice though too. That's why it's here. Our next perk is level 6 perk Vigilant Recycler. This one requires 70 science, and this one makes it so whenever you're using energy weapons, you're twice as likely to get drained cells from these, and it also makes it so you get better recipes for all the energy weapons. This is really nice because drained cells can be recycled back into just regular ammo, which is great. You just get more ammo from that, and being able to craft the optimized cells is really good because that's pretty much the best ammo for energy weapons. That's why it's here. Next perk is Grim Reaper Sprint, and this one has been toned down quite a bit from Fallout 3. This one is a level 20 perk that doesn't have any requirements, and this makes it so any kill in VATS restores 20 action points immediately. This is not nearly as strong as it was in Fallout 3, where it refunded 100% of your action points back. This is just 20 flat. This is still really nice for a VATS build, and I would recommend it for those builds, but it's nowhere near as strong as it was in the previous game. Next up is our other level 6 perk, which is Hand Loader, which is basically the same as Vigilant Recycler, but it's for regular guns. Hand Loader requires 70 repair, and this makes it so anytime that you're shooting a gun, you're twice as likely to recover brass or holes from this, as well as it gives you all the hand loading recipes to make different ammo. This is pretty strong. Some of this ammo is really, really good, like the jacketed soft points for 308s. The 357 rounds are just a straight upgrade to all the other 357 rounds, so that's really good. I guess besides hollow points, you could argue are a bit better against certain enemies. The 44s are really good. The 4570s get extra damage. The 45 supers are fantastic. So you got a lot of options there with Hand Loader, and it does make any sort of guns build that much better if you want to be making match grade ammo. And then our very last perk in the B tier is Heave Ho. This is a level 2 perk that requires 5 strength and 30 explosives, and this makes it so you have a 50% increase velocity to any sort of thrown weapon in the game. Now this doesn't sound all that crazy, and you think it would be a bit lower because thrown weapons aren't super common, especially like thrown melee weapons. Thrown explosives are like grenades, but this doesn't only count towards those weapons. It also counts to any explosive weapon that counts as lobbing it, because that also counts as throwing it. So grenade rifles also get a huge bonus from this. Grenade rifles, grenade machine guns, grenade launchers. This one is a really strong perk for explosive builds, and that's why it's all the way up here. If it was just for melee and just for throwing grenades, it would still be good, but it wouldn't be this high up. It's mostly because of a technicality that this one gets buffed up quite a bit. So with all the B tiers out of the way, let's move on to the A tier perks now, and these ones are pretty solid generally, which we have 15 of these, and our very first one is Eye for Eye. This is a Zion perk as well. This one requires you to be level 20, no other requirements, and this one makes it so for each crippled limb that you have, you get 10% more damage. This is pretty good because you can have up to potentially 60% more damage if you have both your arms broken, both your legs broken, your chest, and your head broken. You probably don't want all of these broken at the same time, and you probably just want minor bonuses for this because they all come at a downside, and I don't really like this perk. I don't think it's that good, but the damage buff is really high, so it is arguably the highest amount of damage bonus you can get from it, and if you're using an explosives build, it's actually quite strong because who cares if all my limbs are broken? I can just lob anything over the hill and it'll probably kill whatever's on the other side of it. Yeah, it's really nice for that. Or if I'm putting down placed explosives, in which case it doesn't really matter if I can't see, walk, or like aim my weapon. something just has to run across it and I'll get that extra damage. Also, weirdly enough, this is another perk that's bugged, specifically for the German version, where for some reason if you have all of your limbs crippled, you get another 10% more damage. Why it only works for the German version of Fallout New Vegas, I don't know, but that is another bug that's in the game. Up next is the level 8 perk Pack Rat. This one requires 5 intelligence and 70 barter. This one is more specific for a hardcore run than it is for just a regular run. If you're doing a regular run, this one is not as good, but in a hardcore run, this one is really good, and that's basically all I play. So Pack Rat makes it so any item that weighs 2 or less, its weight is cut in half. That is really good. That gives you a ton more carry weight than you would think, because almost all food weighs 2 or less. Ammo, everything besides the mini nukes weighs less than 2 weight, so all of your ammo gets cut in half in terms of weight. Some weapons also getting cut in half by this, like some melee, some unarmed, and some pistols do, which is really cool. You can carry around even more stuff thanks to this, and it's just such a nice quality of life improvement on the hardcore difficulty, which is why it's here. Up next is Ninja. This is another level 20 perk, and this one requires 80 melee weapons and 80 sneak, and this one makes it so you get a higher crit chance with melee and unarmed, as well as you get more sneak crit damage with melee and unarmed. This is kind of cool, although this one is also bugged. It doesn't give you as much as it claims, and it's not as strong as it was in Fallout 3 because of it not giving you the amount that it's supposed to. It's supposed to give you 15% more crit chance. This is not the case. It's actually quite a bit less than that, but it's still something, so it's still a bonus there, and the extra crit damage is nice on a melee and an unarmed build. This one's still going to be good. It's just not as good as it should be, honestly. Then we have our level 2 perks of Black Widow and Confirmed Bachelor. This is 10% more damage towards males, as well as unique dialogue options. This is good. You're going to be fighting more guys than girls, generally, and doing a little bit more damage, as well as having some other options to speak to them can be super helpful, as well as this is a level 2 perk. So normally you wouldn't have the most options, although New Vegas actually gives you quite a few level 2 options, and these ones are some of the best ones that you can get. Next is the level 18 perk Paralyzing Palm. This one requires 70 unarmed, and this one makes it so when you hit an enemy in VATS with unarmed, there's a chance that you can paralyze them for 30 seconds. Now, if you paralyze an enemy for 30 seconds and there's nobody else around to help them, it's pretty much a free win at that point, so it's really good there. If you're fighting multiple enemies, then this one's not going to be quite as good, unless you can paralyze all of them, which there's a chance that you can do that. Next perk is our level 12 perk Pyromaniac. This one requires 60 explosives, and this one makes it so you get 50% more damage with fire weapons. Now, in Fallout 3, this one could be good, but it was mostly good because of the shish kebab. The shish kebab is still really good in New Vegas, but there's a whole lot more options with this one, where you still have the flamers, you have the incinerators, you have the shish kebab, as well as you've got like the superheated Saturnite Fist, which is one of the strongest weapons in the game, and this makes it so you get even more damage. A 50% bonus in damage is really big. That's the highest single amount of damage boost that you can get, besides eye for an eye triggering if you have all broken limbs, or at least 5 broken limbs, then it can match Pyromaniac, which you could stack these on top of one another if you would like. It is still a very specific build though, so if you're not planning on going with fire weapons, then don't take this one. Our next perk is the level 8 perk Commando. This one is another VATS perk, and this one makes so you get 25% more accuracy in VATS with two-handed weapons. This is really good because a lot of the best VATS weapons are two-handed weapons. Like All American is crazy good with a VATS build, so Commando makes that even better. And you're just more likely to be using rifles and shotguns and stuff like that, two-handed weapons, than you are to be using one-handed weapons. Not saying you can't do it, it's still pretty good, but this one I think is a bit better. Then we get another VATS perk with our level 12 perk of Sniper. This one requires 6 perception and 6 agility, and this one makes it so you're 25% more likely to hit targets in the head. This is just really good. If you're going with a VATS build, you want to take this, and even if you're not going with a VATS build, but you use VATS fairly often, or at least somewhat frequently, hitting enemies in the head is going to be generally the go-to spot just to hit them so that you do a bit more damage. Sticking with the theme of VATS, we have Concentrated Fire next, which requires you to be level 18 and have 60 energy weapons as well as 60 guns. And this one makes it so each time that you target a specific limb in VATS, you get 5% more accuracy towards it. Just makes it so you're more likely to hit in VATS, and if you run something like All American, you've got a full VATS build, you can target something like 20 times, and regardless of the distance, you're going to have a pretty high chance of hitting it. Next up is one of our level 50 perks, and this is the Neutral perk, and this is Just Lucky I'm Alive. This one does require you to have neutral karma, but that's the only requirement for it, and this one gives you plus 4 luck for 3 minutes upon finishing a battle with less than 25% HP, as well as you become immune to crit hits, which is really good, and you also get 50% more crit damage. The big seller from this one is the 50% more crit damage. That is a huge increase in crit damage. The luck is kind of whatever, because you have to be at low HP and it only lasts for 3 minutes. I don't really like that being on a timer, as well as having another specification to it. Immune to crit hits and crit damage is going to be the main reason why you want to go with this. All the level 50 perks are pretty good. I think this is the least good out of the level 50 perks though. Then we've got the level 14 perk Purifier. This one doesn't have any requirements, and this one gives you 50% more damage with melee and unarmed whenever you're fighting anything that's considered an abomination. So this includes centaurs, night stalkers, spore plants, spore carriers, death claws, and super mutants, as well as ghouls, to some extent, at least feral ghouls. And Purifier is really good for a melee and unarmed build because these are some of the stronger enemies. Super mutants are pretty tough and death claws are pretty tough, and just having more damage towards something like night stalkers early on is also really good. Having more damage like this in general is really nice if you're going with an unarmed or melee build. If you're not going with either of those, then this one isn't that useful to you. Up next is our level 16 perk Chem Resist. This one requires you to have 60 medicine, and this makes it so you're half as likely to get addicted. This one's really nice, and if you want to stack it with Old World Gourmet, it's actually really good, especially for a chems build, which is quite strong. So it's really nice for that, and a lot of the chems in this game are significantly better than they are in some of the other Fallout games. Next up is the level 16 perk Meltdown. This one requires you to have 90 energy weapons in order to get, and this makes it so whenever you kill an enemy with an energy weapon, it will explode, dealing damage to everything around it. This is pretty strong, especially against small enemies, and it makes it so any energy weapon can clear out buildings or really clear out groups of enemies very fast. This one does have kind of the downside, though, of you can also get caught up in the explosion and deal damage to yourself. I've broken limbs and killed myself with this one a couple of times, so you do have to watch out for that, but it is really strong on an energy weapons build. Next up is the level 6 perk Shotgun Surgeon. This one requires 45 guns, and this makes it so any shotgun, regardless of what ammo that you're using in the shotgun, ignores 10 damage threshold of the enemy that you're shooting. This makes it so shotguns effectively get armor-piercing rounds on everything, and that's pretty good, especially towards things like buckshot that have multiple pellets, where heavier armors can negate some of the damage from that. Being able to rip through a portion of that armor is really, really nice. And then our last perk here in A tier is Hit the Deck. Hit the Deck is a level 12 perk that requires 70 explosives, and this makes it so you get plus 25 damage threshold towards explosives. This also counts towards your own explosives, which is really nice if you're running an explosives build, because you are going to hurt yourself with your explosives at some point. It also makes it so if you're getting grenaded or really any explosives thrown at you, or you step on explosives, you're not going to be taking as much damage. And that's going to be good on pretty much any build. So that's why it's here at the top of our A tier. Now we move on to our last perks, which are our S tier perks, of which we have 19 of them. So starting out our list at the bottom of S tier, we have the level 14 perk Jury Rigging. This one requires 90 repair, and this one makes it so you can repair items that are roughly equivalent to other items. So you can repair manual action guns with other manual action guns, meaning that if you have something like a lever action rifle that you really like, you can repair it with a single shot shotgun, or a bolt action rifle, or a pump action shotgun. Does it make sense? Not really, but you can do that. So you can pretty much cannibalize all of the lower tier weapons, all of the potentially bad weapons, into better weapons. This can be really good for pretty much every build. It also makes it so you can cannibalize armors into your armor. One-handed melee weapons can be fixed with any other one-handed melee weapon, and same goes with two-handed melee weapons. So if you find like a chainsaw that's in low HP, you can fix it with a pool cue. How you do that, I don't know, but it is a really, really good quality of life perk. It also makes it so you can easily break the game in terms of just the economy. You can find a bunch of garbage items, find one good item, turn all that garbage into that one good item, and then sell it away for way more profit. It's a really, really good perk. Up next is our level 6 perk, Demo Expert. This one requires 50 explosives. You can take this one 3 times, and for each level, it gives you 20% more damage with your explosives. Explosive weapons in New Vegas are really good. They're much better in this game than probably in any of the other Fallout games because you have such a variety to them. The grenade rifles are fantastic. You've got like the missile launcher, which has always been solid. You got the Fat Man. You've got plenty of other explosives, thrown explosives, and placed explosives that are really, really good if you want to be maxing them out. And this just gets you so much damage from it, so it's really good for those builds. Our next perk is the level 2 Dead Money perk, Light Touch. This one requires 6 agility and 45 repair, and this one makes it so whenever you're wearing light armor, you have an additional 5% more crit chance, as well as enemies suffer from a negative 25% crit chance when hitting you. This is really good, especially for the start, where light armor is very common, and some of the best armors in the game are light armor. So this can give you a huge advantage in the early game and still be a pretty decent advantage towards the mid and late game too. So I think Light Touch is probably the best of the level 2 perks that you can have. And funny enough, since this is a Dead Money perk, you can actually cheat it out with other perks too. Since you could pick this or any of the other level 2 Dead Money perks, and then you could leave Good Springs, respec your character, and you get to keep this perk too. That's another bug that happens with these perks, so that makes it even stronger. Up next is our good level 50 perk, which is Thought You Died. So you need to have good karma in order to get this, and this one gives you plus 10 HP per 100 karma that you have, as well as your karma is reset back to 0, so you're going to have to get your karma back up to get this extra HP. But this also gives you 10% more damage with everything, and it also makes you immune to crits. This one is pretty nice. It makes you tankier, and it gives you a little bit more damage. It also gives you the immunity to crits, which all these level 50 perks have. So that's good. I think this one's a little bit better for most builds than the neutral one, since that one's more for crit builds, and crit builds are really strong, so on those builds that one could be argued to be better. But this one I think is better overall by a little bit. All of these perks that we're going over now are all really strong, and it's become kind of hard to place them against one another. Then we have the level 20 perk, Them's Good Eating. This one requires 55 survival. This is an Old World Blues perk, and this makes it so any living creature has a 50% chance of dropping healing items of thin red paste or blood sausage when looted. This might not sound all that strong on paper because these are just 2 consumable items, but with how often they drop, and they can drop multiple of them, they are really good. They're worth a ton of money, so you can easily break the game in terms of just the amount of money you can get from these, as well as these are 2 of the best healing items in the game, so you can stack them together on the hardcore difficulty and have a lot of healing. You can also turn them into thick red paste and black blood sausages, and Them's Good Eating is a very underrated perk that I don't really hear a whole lot of people talk about in New Vegas, but it's really good. If you've never tried it before, try it out. It also makes it so dead money is incredibly easy, because you basically have an infinite source of healing. Then we have the level 6 perk, Toughness. This one requires 5 endurance, and you can get this one twice. For each level of this gets you plus 3 damage threshold permanently. That's pretty good. Just having more armor is great. That's good for any sort of build, and since you can grab this twice, that's basically free light armor that you're throwing on top, or free best clothing and slot, at least in terms of defense, on top of whatever other defenses you have. So this one's actually pretty nice. This one's really good for really any build. Then we have our last level 50 perk, which is the evil perk, which is called Ain't Like That Now. Ain't Like That Now resets your karma back to 0. This one gives you plus 25% faster action point regeneration rate, which is pretty good, as well as it gives you a huge 20% more attack speed with every weapon, and it gives you immunity to crits. This one I think is probably the best of the level 50 perks, although all 3 of them are really good. But this one in particular, just getting more attack speed with weapons is really strong. And for a VATS build, the extra action point regeneration is really nice too. Then we have the level 12 perk, Piercing Strike. This one requires 70 unarmed, and this makes it so all of your melee and unarmed attacks ignore 15 points of damage threshold. So pretty much any enemy that is wearing medium armor, or most medium armors, light armor, or clothing pretty much is naked towards you when you're attacking them with melee or unarmed. This is really strong for a melee or an unarmed build, especially weapons that attack multiple times in quick succession. The only time that this wouldn't be all that great is weapons that already ignore armor, like the Chainsaw, the Ripper, the Thermic Lance. But assuming you're not using those weapons, and even if you are using those weapons, you're still probably going to take Piercing Strike because you're probably using other weapons in combination with them. Then we have the level 8 Zion perk, which is Grunt. Grunt requires 45 guns and 20 explosives, and this one makes it so you get 20% more damage with 9mm pistols, submachine guns, 45 pistols and submachine guns, service rifles, assault rifles, marksman carbines, light machine guns, frag grenades, grenade rifles, grenade launchers, and combat knives. So you get more damage with those, and a lot of those weapons are some of the best weapons. All-American is one of the best VATS weapons and just one of the best general-purpose weapons. Survivalist Rifle could be argued as one of the best weapons in the game. Chance's Knife counts as a combat knife and is really strong. Light Machine Gun is pretty strong. The 45 pistols and SMG are both pretty good, especially the unique pistol. The 9mm unique submachine gun is really good, and since you can get that pretty early on, those weapons are easy to find. Frag grenades and grenade rifles are some of the best explosives. You just have some of the best weapons here with Grunt, and that just gets you more damage overall. This is a really good perk. And speaking of perks that are very similar to this, we got Cowboy up next. This is also another level 8 perk that requires 45 guns and 45 melee weapons, and this one gets you 25% more damage with dynamite, hatchets, knives, revolvers, and lever action guns. There's quite a few really good ones here, too. Dynamite is kind of whatever. Hatchets are kind of whatever. Knives are good because this counts as like the Bowie knife, and it counts towards Chance's knife. Both pretty much top tier melee weapons. That's really good. Revolvers are also generally quite strong throughout any part of New Vegas. And lever actions are also considered really strong. Then we have the level 22 perk, Laser Commander. This one requires 90 energy weapons, and this makes it so you do an additional 15% more damage, as well as you have an extra 10% crit chance for any laser weapon, and this counts outside of your bonuses to laser weapons. This is really strong on weapons like the laser rifle, which is already incredibly powerful, the tri-beam laser, and especially the Gatling laser. Because the Gatling laser has a very low crit chance, but when you just give it 10% bonus regardless, and this can actually be stacked with other bonuses that don't count towards multiples that you would have on the initial crit hit chance of the weapon, you can kill things very, very quickly. It makes it so the DPS rises with those weapons by a lot. It's also really good with like the laser RCW. That one's pretty nice with all these too. If you stack all that stuff, it's a very strong build. Then we got the level 4 perk, Rad Child. Rad Child requires 70 survival, and this one makes it so you regenerate 2 HP per 200 rads that you've accumulated. So this can stack all the way up to having 800 rads, because if you go up to 1,000 rads, you just automatically die. You don't want to go that high. But this is 8 HP per second that you're regenning. And that might not sound like a whole lot, but when you see it in action, you regenerate a ton of HP. This is probably one of the best perks that you can get early on, because radiation is not super common throughout New Vegas. You don't usually have to worry about dying from radiation because of this perk. You can usually keep it at very high rads. Now, you still get the negatives from having those high rads, like losing strength, losing endurance, so you are going to be losing out on total HP because of this. But just the fact that you can keep surviving and basically never have to use any of your healing is really strong, especially in the early game, because that means all of your stim packs can just be effectively converted into caps. And yeah, that's really, really good. It also makes it so if you get fully irradiated and then go to dead money, you don't have to worry about the cloud or anything. The cloud cannot kill you. You will regenerate HP faster than it can hurt you at any point besides the points where it's heavily condensed. And that is really strong. This is definitely a perk that I underestimated a lot and didn't really use it that much because I always thought the special stat bonuses were pretty bad to be losing. But honestly, just having like so much HP is really good. It's also really good on like a melee or an unarmed build, because you don't necessarily need to be worrying about your health mid-fight. You can just keep fighting and you're usually fine with this. Our next perk is End Stay Back. This is a level 10 perk from Dead Money. This one requires 70 guns, and this one makes it so shotguns now have a 10% chance per pellet of knocking down enemies. This is really strong. On certain shotguns, this isn't crazy, like the double barrel shotgun and probably the single shot shotgun. It's not really all that insane, but on like the riot shotgun or the hunting shotgun or the lever action shotgun, it is really good because you can just bully any enemy in the game to death. So usually shotguns shoot out multiple pellets. This is worse if you're using slugs, but if you're just using regular buckshot, you're more likely to knock down enemies. If any enemy gets knocked down, you can just keep firing at it and it likely can't get back up, and you can kill them super easy. It makes it so the riot shotgun can legitimately bully anything. Recently, at least my most recent playthrough of New Vegas, I ran a 10 times enemy spawn, and we ran into like the Deathclaw cave where they are super condensed and there's 10 times the amount. And with the riot shotgun plus this, it made it so I could just bully through the entire cave, because it didn't matter how many Deathclaws were coming, I could fire and just keep them pushed back and knocked on the ground faster than they could actually get up and like run towards me. It was kind of insane. Then we have the level 8 perk, Super Slam. Super Slam requires 6 strength and 45 melee weapons, and what this one does is it makes it so all melee weapons and unarmed weapons besides thrown weapons have a chance of knocking down an enemy. This is 15% chance for unarmed and one-handed melee, and a 30% chance with two-handed melee. This is also really strong. If you can knock down enemies with like your super sledge, your fire axe, whatever it is, knock them on the ground, it's going to be really easy for you to beat that enemy to death because it can't fight back in that moment, and that's really good for a melee or unarmed build. Moving on to the last 5 perks that we have to talk about. First up, we have Finesse. This is a level 10 perk that doesn't have any requirements, and this one just gets you 5% more crit chance. This is really good. More crit chance is good on almost any build. The only exception to this is explosives. If you're running explosives, don't take this because explosives don't care about crit hits. Like, most of them can't hit crits, and if they can, they do like 1 damage. I think the highest amount of crit damage that you can actually do with any explosive weapon is like 13. And who cares about that when your gun does 200, 300 damage per shot? You're getting an extra 13 damage at most on top of it. Then we have the level 24 perk, Slayer. This one requires 7 agility and 90 unarmed, and this makes it so all unarmed and melee attacks are 30% faster. This is really good. Melee and unarmed being that much quicker is really nice. This can stack with other attack speed bonuses too. You could stack this with Ain't Like That Now, and you could also stack it with like Atomic, and you can also stack it with Rushing Water. And if you stack this with Super Slam, it's really dumb, and it makes it so any melee weapon can bully pretty much anything in the game. There's not really an exception to that. It's very, very strong. Then we've got Chemist. Chemist is a level 14 perk that requires 60 medicine, and this makes it so all of your chems last twice as long. This is really good because you can stack turbo with this, and this isn't just chems, this is any consumable. So healing also lasts twice as long, and any bonus effects that you get from that last twice as long, which is good. As well as it does synergize with another perk that we're going to be talking about here in a second that makes it even stronger. So you can slow down time, you can get more damage, you can get more attack speed, you can stack all these together, and it's really, really strong. Then coming in at our number 2 spot, we have the level 16 perk Better Crits. This was actually our number 1 perk in Fallout 3, but I would say that it's been one-upped by a different perk that we're going to talk about here in a second. This one requires 6 perception and 6 luck. This is basically the main reason why you want any perception at all, and this one makes it so that you get 50% more damage with crit hits. Doing more crit damage is good. If you can hit more crits, you're going to be getting extra damage on top of that, and then doing even more damage is fantastic. The only time that this is going to be bad is once again on explosive builds. You don't want to go for better crits because your crits kind of suck anyway. On every other build, melee, unarmed, laser weapons, energy weapons in general, guns, crit hits are really good, so better crits is really strong. And then our number 1 perk is the level 30 perk that you get from Old World Blues. This is Implant GRX. This one requires 8 endurance, and you can get this one twice. What this one does is it gives you a non-addictive subdermal turbo injector that you can use 5 times per day that lasts for 2 seconds. This slows down time for 2 seconds, so you essentially have 10 seconds of slowed down time every single day that you want to use this. And when time is slowed down, you can pretty much bully anything. You can get out of pretty much any bad situation unless you were one hit away from death. You can initiate fights so much easier. You can end fights so much easier. It's just really, really strong regardless of the build that you're using. On top of that, with the second rank of this, it now gives you 10 total uses of this, and it also gives you 3 seconds. So that's 30 full seconds where time is slowed to a crawl, and you can pretty much do whatever you want in there. You can actually even stack this higher though, because if you get the perk Day Tripper, which you just get from taking so many addictive chems, it makes it so this lasts even longer. And if you get Chemist, this also lasts 50% longer because this does count as a chem. And that's really good. You can stack a lot of this and you get up to, I think it's at the highest like 62 seconds in total time once per day, to where time is slowed and you can do whatever you want. Which most fights are not going to take you 60 seconds if you're allowed to just keep wailing on anything. So yeah, this one is probably the strongest perk in Fallout New Vegas, and one of the strongest perks we've seen in any of the Fallout games. It is really good. And that'll do it for all of the perks in Fallout New Vegas ranked from worst to best. What are your thoughts on these and where would you place them? Thank you guys so very much for watching this. This was super fun to make. I hope you guys have a great rest of your day, and I'll talk to you next time. Bye-bye, everybody.